He was one of the oldest and wisest elves ever to walk Middle-earth. Born when the first elves enter into the history of the world, his life would see the rise and fall of two Dark Lords. He would serve the elves of Middle-earth, destined to deny his own desire and instead help others to make the great journey into the West. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the life and travels of Círdan the Shipwright. Círdan is born around the year of the trees 1050 at Lake Cuiviénen with the rest of the firstborn. There he is first known as Nolwe and is among the Teleri elves. When the time finally comes for the Eldar to make their great journey to the uttermost west of the world, Nolwe and his followers would continue, though many of the Teleri would diverge from the journey. One of the last to fall behind is Elwë, later known as Thingol, who meets Melian the Maya in the forest of Nen Elmoth. There they would fall in love and be caught in an enchantment of their own making for 200 years. We are told that Nolwe's great desire is to see the light of Valinor. However, while the Noldor and the Vanyar make their way to Valinor upon the moving island of Tol Eressëa, Nolwe would not leave his lord behind, and they search for Thingol. Missing the first trip upon Tol Eressëa, these Teleri finally come to the sea, and in Thingol's absence, they take Olwe, his brother, as their king. As they wait for Ulmo to return with Tol Eressëa, Nolwe leads the people in the construction and sailing of ships. It is from this that Nolwe takes the name Círdan, which means shipwright in Sindarin. Now I know what you're thinking, and yes, this means that when we say Círdan the Shipwright, we're pretty much saying shipwright, the shipwright. During this time on the coasts of Beleriand, the Teleri began a great friendship with Ossë, a Maya of the sea associated with Ulmo. Throughout the years, Círdan continues to search for Thingol, more than most of the other Teleri. Due to his allegiance to Thingol, Círdan once again comes to the shore too late for the second journey of Tol Eressëa, coming to the sands to find his kin had left. As he stands on the shore, he sees in the distance a glimmer of light upon Eressëa as it vanishes into the west. In this moment, the Valar put a message into Círdan's heart, warning him that no ship of his making could endure the voyage for many years until his work be of the utmost worth and remembered in song. Círdan obeys this prompting upon his heart and sees a vision of a ship, the very same that would one day sail both the sea and the sky. Círdan remains on the coast of Beleriand with the Teleri who had chosen to stay behind out of their love for Ossë. These people come to be known as the Falathrim, and Círdan, as their lord, founds the realm of Falas. There they would create great havens and build many ships. In the year of the trees 1497, Morgoth attacks the elves of Beleriand in the first battle. His orcs cut Círdan off from the other elves of the world, and the Falathrim are besieged for many months, and separated from the elves of Thingol, who by now had founded his own realm of Doriath. This siege ends due to the arrival of the Noldor, who had exiled themselves from Valinor. Under Feanor, they attack Morgoth's forces in the north, and the siege upon Círdan's people is abandoned. These orcs heading north would be destroyed by the elves led by Feanor's son Celegorm, and Falas was finally free from attack. 20 years after the first rising of the sun, Fingolfin is now the High King of the Noldor, and calls for a great celebratory feast, the Mereth Adarthad, the Feast of Reuniting, where emissaries of elves from all over Beleriand, including Círdan, meet at the pools of Ivrin, so that they may be reunited and recognize their common enemy, Morgoth. Among the Noldor, Círdan becomes close friends with Galadriel's brother, Finrod Felagund. With Finrod's help, the elves build even greater havens at Brithombar and Eglarest. as well as the tower of Barad Nimras. However, the friendship among the greater groups of the Noldor and Sindar would not last. Morgoth begins spreading tales throughout the lands, tales of the kinslaying at Alqualondë, in which the Noldor under Feanor killed the Teleri in Valinor to steal their ships. When Círdan hears these rumors, he sends messages to King Thingol. When Thingol hears of elves of their own kind being slaughtered by the Noldor, he banishes the use of their language of Quenya within his realm, and greater friction grows between the Sindar and the Noldor. While the conflicts with Morgoth over the centuries of the First Age would primarily be fought by the Noldor, Círdan is among the Sindar who take action at certain points. 7 years after the Dagor Bragollach, Morgoth launches the second assault on Hithlum. He sends a force through the passes of the Ered Wethrin, which lays siege to Ethel Sirion. After Húrin drives the orcs from the mountains and across the scorched plains of Anfauglith, Morgoth's second force descends from the north and a battle occurs on the plain. King Fingon is outnumbered and facing defeat when Círdan's force travels up the Firth of Drengist, where they come upon the orcs from the west. The orcs are defeated, and those that remain flee into the Iron Mountains. 10 years later, the fortunes of the Noldor are at their worst, as they are defeated in the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, and Morgoth seizes control of the northern lands of Beleriand. In the aftermath, many survivors of the north find refuge at the havens of Falas. In the coming days, Círdan's shipmasters among the Falathrim would launch guerrilla attacks from the sea upon the orcs. However, the very next year of 473, Morgoth's attention would turn to Círdan. His forces come to the southern realm and lay siege to Brithambar and Eglarest. The Falathrim fight valiantly, but we are told that among Morgoth's force are skilled smiths, miners, and masters of fire, who build mighty siege engines and break the walls. Barad Nimras is cast down, and most of Círdan's people are killed or taken into thraldom. Círdan manages to escape with a small group of survivors, including Gil-galad, a Noldoran prince. They sail to the Isle of Balar. They establish both there and at the mouths of Sirion a refuge for the elves, and they would continue to receive refugees from the north. When Turgon of Gondolin receives news of the fall of Falas, he asks Círdan to send messengers to the uttermost west, to ask for the aid of the Valar themselves. Círdan builds 7 great ships which head west, yet none would return. There would be only one lone elf who returns to Beleriand, Voronwe, who is saved by Ulmo from the shipwreck and taken ashore. There he meets the man Tuor and leads him to Gondolin. Later, Ulmo would use Círdan himself as a messenger. Ulmo tells Círdan to instruct Orodreth of Nargothrond to shut his gates and destroy his bridge, so that the realm may be spared from Morgoth's attacks. However, Círdan's messengers are overruled by Turin Turambar, Orodreth's chief counselor, and in 495, Orodreth is killed, and the realm of Nargothrond is taken by the dragon Glaurung. 15 years later, the mighty hidden city of Gondolin itself would fall, the last resistance against Morgoth in the north. With the news of Turgon's demise, Gil-galad is made High King of the Noldor. Refugees from Gondolin would make their way south to the havens of Sirion, led by Tuor and Idril. Círdan would become great friends with Tuor and Idril's son, Eärendil, who becomes his apprentice and much like a foster son. Together they build a great ship, Vingilot, the very ship that would fulfill Círdan's vision from over 500 years earlier. When the havens of Sirion are attacked by the sons of Feanor in the third kinslaying in 538, it would be Eärendil, who was on a voyage in his ship at the time, that would make his way to Valinor, rousing the wrath of the Valar. After fighting alongside the host of Valinor, Eärendil would forever sail the skies of Middle-earth in his ship blessed by the Valar. From this time, Círdan is given foresight that surpasses that of any other elf. This is believed to possibly be a special gift from the Valar. After the War of Wrath to end the First Age, Círdan once again puts aside his heart's deepest desire to go west. He embraces his fate to be the one to send others on their way to Valinor, but to not yet pass there himself. With the destruction of Beleriand, Círdan and a small following make their way east, settling in the newly founded realm of Lindon. The High King Gil-galad would rule over Lindon, and Círdan would found the port of Mithlond, also known as the Grey Havens. Over the centuries, Círdan would make friends with voyagers from Numenor who visited their shores. One such Numenorian is Aldarion, whom he instructs on not only the construction of ships, but also of seaside architecture. It is said that when Annatar comes to Eriador, Círdan advises against the creation of the Rings of Power, but the ambition of the Gwaith y Myrdain leads them to ignore his advice. Later, when the 3 elven rings are sent from Celebrimbor to Galadriel and Gil-galad for safekeeping, Gil-galad entrusts Círdan with one of these great rings, Narya, the Ring of Fire. While Sauron would go on to destroy Eregion and lead a terrible campaign throughout Eriador, it is said he would not dare to attack Lindon or the Grey Havens, believing them to be too strong with their Numenorian allies. Nearly 1700 years later, Numenor is long gone, and a final battle is at hand. Círdan joins the last alliance of elves and men in their final attack upon Sauron's lands of Mordor. Alongside Gil-galad are both Círdan and Elrond. In throwing down Sauron, Gil-galad is killed, and the first of Círdan's foster sons is no more. We are told by Elrond that only he and Círdan were by Gil-galad in this final act, and were aware of Isildur taking the One Ring from Sauron's fallen body. Together, they urge Isildur to destroy the ring in the fires of Orodruin, but Isildur refuses. With Gil-galad slain, Círdan returns to the Grey Havens, and Elrond to Rivendell. In Mithlond, Círdan would rule over the remaining elves of Lindon. For 1,000 years, Lindon would be at peace. At this time, however, a shadow begins to rise, a re-emerging Sauron. To combat this threat, the Valar send the Istari, or wizards, to Middle-earth. They come to the Grey Havens and are greeted by Círdan. It is said that Círdan alone, with his incredible foresight, knew the true purpose of the Istari. He foresees Gandalf's future and sees that the wizard would have great use for his own Ring of Power. Giving him Narya, he proclaims that Gandalf would use it to inspire the hearts of men. In the 1300s, the realm of Angmar rises and begins its war upon the great northern realm of Arnor. Throughout the war, lasting hundreds of years, Círdan supports the men of Arnor and its splinter kingdoms. In the waning days of this war, he sends a ship from Lindon to the ice bay of Foroshel to save the lost king Arve Dui, who was exiled by the attacks of the Witch King. While the crew would endure the harsh winter to find the king, his rash attempt to return that same winter spells destruction. The ship is sunk, and all aboard are lost to the waters, including Arve Dui and his 2 Palantiri. In 1976, Círdan and his elves of Lindon ally with the survivors of Arnor and are able to defeat the Witch King in the Battle of Fornost. With the arrival of the elves of Rivendell, led by Glorfindel, the Witch King is finally driven from Eriador, and the kingdom of Angmar is no more. With the former Arnor in tatters, Círdan would take possession of the Elendil Stone, which dwelt in Emin Baraed. and was not connected to the other seeing stones. Rather, it could only gaze into the west. For nearly a century, we know nothing of Círdan's deeds. In 3018, when Elrond calls for his great council, the elf Galdor serves as Círdan's messenger in Imladris. There he speaks on behalf of Círdan. The next mention we have of Círdan comes over 2 years after the ring is destroyed, when on September 29th, 3021, Frodo, Bilbo, Elrond, Galadriel, Gandalf, and Shadowfax board the White Ship. As they came to the gates, Círdan the shipwright came forth to greet them. Very tall he was, and his beard was long, and he was gray and old, save that his eyes were keen as stars. And he looked at them and bowed, and said, "All is now ready." This ship was one of the last built by Círdan to depart Middle-earth forever. However, it appears that Círdan would indeed remain behind yet again, for there were still yet more souls to make their great journey on the straight road of the sea. 61 years after Frodo's departure, Samwise Gamgee would sail from the Grey Havens himself, the last of the bearers of the One Ring to make the trip. Eventually, Círdan's havens would no longer be needed, for there would come a day when no more elves in Middle-earth would wish to cross the sea. At some unknown date, that day would indeed come, and Galadriel's husband Celeborn and Círdan himself would take the last ship built by Círdan and make the final journey to Valinor. And Círdan, whose greatest desire for thousands of years had been to go to Valinor, would finally make the journey that he had helped so many others to take, sailing into the west. Now, as for the common question of how old Círdan was, we know that at the time of The Lord of the Rings, he is somewhere around 10,800 years old. However, it's interesting to note that in the new Nature of Middle-earth book, we learned that Tolkien had considered making Valian years equal 144 of our own years, rather than the previous 9.5. This change would have meant that Círdan, the eldest of the elves in Middle-earth, would have been somewhere between 63 and 71,000 years old, an incredible number for an incredible elf, one of the most faithful to his calling that the world would ever see. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Jim Limber Davis, Lissamy the Cinda, Dane Ragnarsson, Skycarcass, Zetrock, Grand Strategy Nerd, The Dark-Haired One, Salim Rahman, Slidebelts, Wyland, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.